Sometimes the mess outside is nothing compared to the mess inside.
My name's Lucas. I'm 29 years old, and I make my living working with my hands as an electrician. The spark that set this entire chain of aggravating events into motion began one Friday evening at Romano's Steakhouse on 5th Street, a polished, high-end restaurant with leather booths, low lighting, and a price tag that makes you double-check the menu twice. I had gone out of my way to book us a table there because Marina, my wife of 5 years, had just been promoted to senior marketing manager at her firm. It wasn't a small accomplishment. She had clawed her way up that corporate ladder through endless late nights, constant maneuvering, and plenty of office politics. Knowing Marina's taste for the finer things, I figured a casual bottle of wine at home wouldn't cut it. She expected something grand, and truth be told, I wanted to match the scale of her ambition with a celebration she'd remember. Of course, no event in Marina's life is ever complete without her inner circle. Seated with us that night were her 3 closest companions from her university days, Celeste, Tara, and Harley. The 4 of them had been glued together since their early 20s, practically functioning as a single unit, and Marina had made it perfectly clear from day one of our relationship that they came as part of the deal. "You want me?" she used to joke. "You get them, too." Over time, I learned that wasn't a joke at all. Marrying Marina meant I had unofficially married into their clique, a sorority bond that refused to fade with age. And after half a decade of putting up with their constant presence, their voices, their little inside jokes that never included me, I was more than a little worn down by the routine. The evening had barely gotten underway. We hadn't even made it past the appetizer course of spinach and artichoke dip when Celeste decided it was her moment to shine. She has this calculated smile she wears, one that never warms her eyes, a look that always makes you feel like you're the butt of a joke she's sharing silently with the rest of the room. She leaned forward, fork twirling between her fingers, as though she were conducting a private orchestra, and asked, with that razor-edge sweetness she specializes in, "Still fiddling with electrical wires these days, Lucas? Must be so wonderfully quaint having such a simple basic job." That single word, basic, floated in the air with the subtlety of a foul odor wafting through a church service. Elegant surroundings, expensive wine on the table, and yet here we were sinking to playground-level condescension. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but it stung. Because the truth is, I'm not just some guy fiddling with wires. I'm a licensed professional with my own truck, a solid client base, and a reputation for reliable work. I keep homes lit, businesses running, and the city's backbone of electricity from faltering. It's honest labor, the kind of work you can take pride in. But in their carefully curated corporate world of titles and promotions, it apparently didn't measure up. Tara, never one to miss a chance to back up Celeste, jumped in without pause. She leaned back with a wide grin, tossing her line like she'd been waiting all day for it. "So, Lucas, how's that scrap heap you call a garage? Honestly, how many busted bikes does one man really need?" She cracked up at her own joke, letting out that sharp, staged laugh that begged everyone else at the table to join in, like she'd just landed a late-night stand-up routine. What cut the most wasn't the sting of her words, but the ignorance behind them. My garage wasn't some graveyard of rusted junk. Those were vintage machines, restoration jobs I was bringing back to life piece by piece, with patience and care. I saw real worth in them, the history, the craft, the raw beauty of design that deserved to be saved. For me, it was about honoring legacy and the pride of building something lasting. But trying to explain that to people who toss aside last year's phone like spoiled fruit was useless, like talking straight into a wall. I glanced at Marina, hoping she might step in. Maybe laugh it off and change the subject, or better yet, cut in with a quick, "That's my husband you're mocking." Just something small, a sign she was with me. Instead, what I saw stopped me cold. She sat there with that faint smirk tugging at her lips, sipping her wine slow like she was watching some breezy sitcom. Not once did she shift uncomfortably, not once did she try to stop it. She wasn't just letting it slide. She was enjoying every cheap shot. Then Harley decided to push the knife in and twist. Out of all of them, Harley was the worst. She always used this sickly, sweet voice right before dropping the meanest, most cutting remark. "You know, Marina," she said, leaning in like she was about to whisper state secrets, "you really could do better than this. Remember Jasper from your leadership seminar last month? Now he had real drive and promise." Jasper, some slick finance guy who apparently wowed everyone at Marina's retreat. She'd brought him up more than once over the past few weeks, talking about how smart he was, how ambitious, how he drove a new Tesla and lived in one of those sleek downtown lofts with floor-to-ceiling windows. A real catch, no doubt. The whole table froze for a couple of seconds, and I honestly thought maybe Marina would finally stand up for me after 5 years of marriage. Maybe she'd tell her friends to quit and show some respect. Instead, she just shrugged, literally lifted her shoulders, and with complete ease said, "If you don't like my friends' jokes, Lucas, then just pay the bill and leave." Just like that. We first crossed paths when she was 26, and now she's 31. 5 years of vows, shared plans, building a future side by side, and that's the reply I get. Not a simple, "they're just messing around," not even a weak, "don't take them so seriously," but a cold, "pay the check and go." Like I'm nothing more than some hired hand who lingered too long at the grown-up's table and needs to be shown the door. In that instant, everything snapped into focus. Every sly jab over the years, every time Marina's circle somehow forgot to invite me to their outings, every half-finished chat that died the second I stepped into the room, it all finally added up. To them, I wasn't Marina's partner. I wasn't her equal. I was her pet project, her working-class experiment, something she kept around for reasons she herself probably couldn't even explain anymore. The uncomfortable silence stretched out like a bad song on the radio that you can't turn off. Celeste was smirking smugly behind her overpriced martini glass. Tara was checking her phone notifications like nothing remotely significant had happened, and Harley was looking directly at me with this expectant expression, like she was eagerly waiting for me to apologize or beg forgiveness, or make some kind of dramatic emotional scene that would give them even more material to laugh about and dissect later. But I absolutely refused to give them that satisfaction. I stood up calmly and quietly, like I was just politely excusing myself to use the restroom facilities. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my old leather wallet, the same one my dad gave me when I graduated from trade school, and carefully counted out exactly $62 in cash, enough to cover my meal, my drinks, and a decent tip for our server who didn't deserve to get stiffed just because my wife's friends are genuinely terrible human beings. I placed the money on the table right next to my barely touched dinner plate. "This covers mine," I said, and my voice was steady as a rock, not betraying any of the emotions churning inside. Marina rolled her eyes like I was being overly dramatic and childish, muttered something under her breath about me embarrassing her in public, but I didn't respond or engage, didn't argue, didn't explain myself, didn't give them the big emotional breakdown they were probably hoping to witness. I just walked calmly out of that restaurant, grabbed my truck keys from my pocket, and headed straight for the parking lot. For the first time in years, I felt like I could actually breathe again without restriction. Sitting alone in my reliable F-150 in that fancy brick-paved parking lot, listening to the engine tick and cool down, I tried to figure out exactly how I'd become the punchline in my own marriage. When did loving someone transform into being their personal ATM and emotional punching bag? When did, for better or worse, start meaning pay up and shut up? My phone started buzzing incessantly like crazy, but I needed to get my head straight and process what had just happened first. I drove directly to my best friend Marcus's apartment. Marcus Wu has been my closest buddy since we were both apprentices at Henderson Electric 7 years ago. The guy's got this incredible sixth sense about people and can spot their BS from a mile away. When I showed up at his door at 9:30 on a Tuesday night, probably looking like I'd been hit by a freight train, he took one look at my face and said matter-of-factly, "Took you long enough. No unnecessary questions, no drama, no false sympathy. Just stepped aside and let me in like he'd been expecting me to show up for months. That's Marcus for you. Straight shooter who doesn't waste time on pleasantries when there's real stuff that needs dealing with. His place is a decent one-bedroom in Riverside, nothing fancy but clean and comfortable. The kind of place where you can actually relax and be yourself instead of constantly worrying about putting a water ring on some expensive coffee table or messing up decorative throw pillows that cost more than most people's monthly car payments." Over strong black coffee, I told him absolutely everything that had happened. Marcus listened without interrupting once, occasionally shaking his head or making those disgusted sounds you make when you hear something that really pisses you off. He reminded me of other incidents I'd tried to forget or rationalize away. How they called my sister's beautiful wedding cute for a discount event. How they laughed at my father's accent during his birthday toast, like he was some kind of comedy act instead of a hardworking man who sacrificed everything to give his family a better life in America. "Marina never said anything to defend you," I told Marcus, and even saying it out loud made me feel pathetic and weak. She doesn't just let it happen, brother, Marcus replied with conviction. She actively encourages it. You think they'd keep pulling this disrespectful crap if she shut it down even once? These women follow her lead completely, and her lead is that you're fair game for their entertainment. While we were talking and processing everything, my phone kept lighting up like a damn disco ball. More calls, more text messages, more drama. Now Marina's friends were getting involved in the action too. Celeste sent me some passive-aggressive message about communication and working things out like mature adults. Tara forwarded me some pretentious article about men and emotional intelligence that I definitely didn't ask for or want. But Harley was the real winner of the evening. This woman actually sent me a Venmo request for $150 for emotional distress. The audacity was absolutely breathtaking. That's when I made the decision that probably should have been made months or even years ago. I systematically blocked all of them. Marina, Celeste, Tara, Harley, the whole toxic crew got cut off with a few quick taps on my phone screen. The sudden quiet and peace was almost shocking, like when you don't realize how loud the television is until someone finally turns it off. The next morning, Marina called from her office line since she'd figured out I'd blocked her personal number. Smart move. Actually had to give her credit for that level of determination and problem solving. We need to discuss what happened last night like responsible adults. Can you please come home so we can work this out properly? When I refused her request, she completely lost it and showed her true colors. You're being childish and oversensitive about everything. Do you have any idea how embarrassed and humiliated I was last night? You left me stuck with a $400 restaurant bill. There it was. The real issue bothering her. Not that I'd been disrespected and mocked, not that our marriage was apparently a running joke to her social circle, but that she got stuck paying for overpriced steaks and cocktails. The natural consequences of their own nastiness. Then something interesting happened. I got a warning text from Omar, Harley's boyfriend, from a number I didn't recognize. Good for you, man. I've heard what they actually say about you behind your back. They're scheming something big. Stay sharp and protect yourself. I went to our shared apartment while Marina was at work and found absolute chaos and destruction. Wine bottles scattered everywhere, empty takeout containers from at least 3 different restaurants covering the kitchen counter, and a bright yellow noise complaint notice taped prominently to the front door. The neighbors had called building management and the police twice because Marina's celebration after I left had gotten completely out of control. But the real devastating gut punch came when I walked into my tool room where I keep all my professional equipment. The room was practically empty, picked clean like vultures had been at it. My big red Craftsman toolbox that took me 3 years to fill with quality equipment, my cordless drill set, my multimeter that cost $400, wire dancers, electrical tape, circuit testers, outlet testers. Basically everything that wasn't nailed down or too heavy to easily carry. $9,000 worth of professional equipment that I'd carefully built up over 7 years in the electrical trade just completely vanished. In the garage, the spot where my 1978 Kawasaki KZ-1000 restoration project had been sitting, was empty, except for a small oil stain on the concrete floor. 3 years of weekend work, every Saturday and Sunday, spent carefully rebuilding that beautiful machine from the ground up, and it was just gone like it never existed. I rushed back upstairs and fired up my laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard as I desperately searched Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. It didn't take long to find my bike listed under Motorcycles for Sale, with the headline, Mechanic Special Needs Work, $2,000 OBO. The photos were terrible, obviously taken in a hurry by someone who didn't know anything about motorcycles, but it was definitely my Kawasaki. My restoration project worth at least $8,000 in its current condition, being sold for peanuts by someone who didn't know the first thing about classic motorcycles or their actual value. The listing was posted under Marina's email address, not even trying to hide the theft. The description was particularly insulting. Selling for my ex-husband who left a bunch of junk behind. Bike runs but needs lots of work. Cash only, no lowballers. Ex-husband, junk. I wasn't even officially her ex-husband yet, and she was already rewriting our history to make me sound like some deadbeat who'd abandoned his responsibilities. I immediately called the police and sat right there in my destroyed apartment, surrounded by evidence of what could only be described as systematic theft, and dialed 911. The dispatcher was professional but not exactly encouraging about my chances. Sir, if you have proof of ownership and can document the theft, you can file a report. But since you're married and living together, it gets legally complicated. You'll need receipts, photographs, serial numbers, basically everything you can gather to prove these items belong specifically to you. Complicated, right? Because apparently being married gives someone the automatic right to steal your stuff and sell it online for quick cash. But I had what I needed. I'd always been careful about documentation, receipts going back years for every major tool purchase, photos of my bike in various stages of restoration, even the original title and registration. My dad always taught me to keep detailed records of important purchases. The police officer who showed up was this older guy, probably close to retirement, who looked around the trashed apartment and shook his head like he'd unfortunately seen this kind of domestic situation before. These situations are always messy, he told me while writing information in his little notebook. But theft is theft, regardless of who's doing it. You've got excellent documentation here. I'd strongly recommend getting your remaining property secured somewhere safe before anything else mysteriously goes missing. Mr. Patel, our landlord, called later that day about the noise complaints and police visits. Marina had apparently gone to his office and told him that I'd moved out permanently and abandoned all my responsibilities, and she wanted my name completely removed from the lease. There it was, Marina trying to erase me from the apartment the same way she was trying to erase me from her life. Problem was, my name was on that lease just as much as hers, and I'd been the one making sure rent got paid on time every month for the past 2 years. When I explained the real situation to Mr. Patel, he was understanding. He'd known me as a quiet, responsible tenant who helped elderly neighbors with groceries and never caused any problems. Meanwhile, the whole friend group was imploding spectacularly, and I was getting updates through Omar, who'd become my unofficial intelligence source. The night I walked out had apparently been the beginning of the end for their entire toxic crew. Omar had finally grown a backbone and dumped Harley after he found their private group chat on her phone. The stuff they wrote about their boyfriends was absolutely brutal. Harley called him a placeholder until someone better comes along, and said she was only dating him for the free dinners and concert tickets. Celeste got fired from her marketing job after HR discovered she'd been using the company group chat to trash-talk coworkers the exact same way she'd been trash-talking me for years. Corporate America might tolerate a lot of nonsense, but they draw hard lines at liability issues and hostile work environments. Tara's boyfriend Mike found out about the group chat too, and didn't take it well when he discovered she'd been calling him boring and constantly complaining about his cheap dates to her friends. He broke up with her via text message and moved out of their shared apartment that same weekend. Without boyfriends to help split bills and cover their expensive lifestyles, the whole crew was suddenly struggling financially. Celeste couldn't afford her rent without her corporate job and had to move back in with her parents at 32 years old. Tara was couch surfing with various acquaintances, burning through friendships as fast as she'd burned through her relationship. Harley was working at a coffee shop and posting passive-aggressive inspirational quotes about fake friends and new beginnings on social media. Without a common target like me to unite them and focus their mean girl energy on, they started using their toxic tactics on each other. Harley blamed Celeste for ruining the group dynamic by getting fired. Celeste blamed Tara for being too obvious about her gold-digging tendencies. Tara blamed Marina for not keeping her husband in line better. When Marina needed help moving out of the apartment, none of them were mysteriously available to help. I found a quiet one-bedroom apartment in Riverside, about 10 minutes closer to my main job sites, and the difference in my quality of life was incredible. The rent was $300 less than what I'd been paying for my half of the old place. The neighbors were normal people who said hello in the hallways instead of throwing wine-fueled parties that ended with police visits and property damage. I managed to track down the guy who'd bought my Kawasaki from Marina's Craigslist ad. After explaining the whole situation, he was decent enough to sell it back to me for exactly what he'd paid. Turned out he was a mechanic himself and completely understood how much it would suck to lose a restoration project you'd invested years of work into. Good people still exist in this world. I slowly rebuilt my tool collection with the insurance payout from my theft claim. The police report had actually helped more than I'd expected. Having official documentation made the insurance company take my claim seriously, and I was able to replace most of my professional equipment within a couple months. Omar and I started hanging out regularly, grabbing beers after work and talking about everything except our toxic ex-girlfriends. Turned out we had tons in common beyond just dating women who didn't respect us. He was into motorcycles too, had a Yamaha he'd been thinking about restoring. 6 months after I walked out of Romano's steakhouse, Marina sent me a text that I'd been half expecting. I should have defended you that night. I'm genuinely sorry about everything. Can we try again and work this out? I stared at those words for a long time, reading them over and over while my coffee got cold. Part of me, the part that remembered the good times from early in our relationship before her friends became such a huge influence, felt something. Maybe nostalgia, maybe leftover love, maybe just the human instinct to want closure. But I deleted the message and went to work. Sorry doesn't fix 5 years of letting people treat your husband like garbage. Sorry doesn't give back the tools she sold, or the self-respect I lost sitting at that dinner table. Sorry doesn't change the fact that when push came to shove, she chose her toxic friends over her marriage every single time. Marina moved back in with her mother in New Jersey, a 45-year-old woman sleeping in her childhood bedroom because she'd never learned to live within her means or take care of herself financially. Her former friends blamed her for everything. If she'd just kept me in line better, none of their personal drama would have happened. Meanwhile, I'm absolutely thriving. The Kawasaki purrs through the streets like the classic beauty she was meant to be. My business is solid with repeat customers who appreciate quality work and fair prices. Omar became a genuine friend, the kind who shows up when you need help or just want to watch the game. My mom says I sound lighter, happier, like I'm actually enjoying life again instead of just surviving it. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't fighting back or making big dramatic gestures. Sometimes it's just walking away from people who don't value what you bring to their lives. They thought I'd come crawling back, checkbook in hand, ready to apologize for having the nerve to expect basic respect. Instead, they're the ones paying the price for treating people like disposable entertainment. And me, I'm living my best life, surrounded by people who actually give a damn about me as a human being instead of viewing me as a walking ATM. Turns out the joke was on them all along.